Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the last broadcast for the guidelines, which is for LFPS. Again, I'm not going to be making use of slides, so please make sure that you have the copy of your guidelines with you. I'm again going to go through the basic important information just so that we have a clear understanding of what's expected of you in the exams. So if we start by going through that, again, LFPS is an open book exam. You're allowed to take anything that you want into the exam, provided that it's not of electronic nature. So no laptops, no palm tops, no tablets, no iPads, nothing of the sort. For the case study, there's no multiple choice questions. The entire exam paper is made up of long questions. I want to reiterate again, no templates will be marked. So if you take a template and you cut it out and you paste it into your exam book, a line will be drawn through it and it will not be marked. If the answer is not completely in your own handwriting, it won't be considered. Please, ladies and gentlemen, we get this year in and year out. Don't stick templates into your answer book. It will not be marked. We will only mark answers that are written in your own handwriting. All right. Please read the questions carefully and again look at the mark allocation. Don't waste time by writing too much. Don't expect full marks if you write too little. Again, calculations must be shown in detail. If you don't show the calculation, it's impossible for the examiner to follow your thought process or to mark with your mistakes. Coincidentally, I've just had a question this morning where a student says to me, but he would have done the calculation on 31 years, as in taking the current year as a full year, as opposed to doing it over 30 years, only starting in the new year. That is a reasonable conclusion to draw. So if you had shown your entire calculation and you'd shown your N as being 31 as opposed to 30, we would have marked with that. So if you had just written an answer down, it's not up to the examiner to go and look what the year period was that you had used. So please make sure that you show your full calculations. Students are encouraged to give clear and detailed answers. Again, we cannot have insight into what is not in the exam paper. We don't make assumptions based on your knowledge. Make sure that you give us everything that we need in the question. In all the other exam papers, we always say to you, you can answer in whatever sequence you want, provided you number your questions correctly. For LFPS, we advise the opposite. We say rather answer the paper in the sequence that the questions are given to you. Barring question 1, which is normally a compliance type of question, all the other questions may follow on each other. So if we have asked something in question 2 that has an impact on question 4, but you decide to do question 4 before you've done question 2, then you're not going to get the golden thread going through the exam paper. So our advice to you is rather answer the exam paper in the sequence that it's given to you. The paper can be answered in English and Afrikaans, despite the fact that this is only an English program, and then students are expected to study everything. The guidelines simply give you some elements of what's more important for the exam, but it doesn't give you everything. And I think this is the most important with LFPS. You need to have all your foundation knowledge in place. If you don't have it in place, then the case study is going to be very difficult to do. Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, if we then also look at the content of the paper, it's 100 marks, the same as all the other papers. The paper contains elements of regulatory environment and compliance, all calculations, this is tax and time value of money, and then largely based on a holistic advice regarding all the elements of financial planning. So you really need to go back and revise LFPE, LFPP, and LFPC in order to complete the case study. I think the smallest elements probably come from LFPC, but don't underestimate the corporate element that an exam paper can have in. Okay, if we then look at some areas to pay special attention to, number 1, the future of Financial Advisory and Intermediary Services Act within the financial services industry. Students should also pay attention to Twin Peaks, treating customers fairly, and prudential and conduct standards. This obviously cannot be separated from RDR either, so just have a look at that. students who are not registered for LFPE, I'd also consider or also advise you to look at the guidelines for LFPE this year. There are some important documents that we've made available to students for LFPE. The majority of you should be guests on that module, so make sure that you get hold of that information. All right. Business planning, this year we're looking at the emphasis on someone who is self-employed. So this can either be someone who's got a sole proprietorship, or it can be someone who has a closed corporation or a company. And when I say they have a closed corporation or a company, it means that they can be the majority member's interest holder or shareholder in the company, and then also be an employee of that company. So in other words, they self-employ themselves either through a sole proprietorship, a partnership, or a closed corporation or company. It's important for you to understand what it means to be self-employed, not just from a tax and business entity point of view, but also from employee benefits point of view. Can you be a member of the pension or provident fund? How do medical aid benefits work, and so forth with regards to that. Then also business structures and tax advice with regards to the business conversions at death. So this could either be a person who wishes to convert their business prior to their own death to ensure that there can be perpetual succession, or it can be a person who's now inheriting a business in the sense that it was actually a closed corporation or a company, or even more complicated, a sole proprietorship that actually has no separate value and now wants to make sure that that business that they've inherited is converted. So it can either be a death of the client, being that they want their business converted, or it can be the death of another person who is now leaving a business to your client, and this client now wants conversion advice. So make sure that you can do it both ways. All right. Tax planning, you must be able to do a complete income tax calculation, and you should be able to analyze an existing tax calculation. So for example, we could give you a income tax calculation that someone else has done, and you now need to analyze whether this tax calculation has been done correctly, because what often happens is we have an accountant who does our tax, we bring the tax with, we see a financial planner, and then the tax that the accountant has done is not 100% correct. Financial planner should be able to identify those type of errors and then advise the client accordingly. Estate planning, you should be able to analyze a will and rectify errors. If we ask you to redraft a portion in a will, we're not looking at your draftsmanship skills, we're looking at the content. So I know people who come from a legal background are going to find redrafting a clause in a will very easy to do. People who come from the BCom, commerce type of background might find it more difficult. But it's important for you to understand that we're not looking at the draftsmanship skills. We're looking at the content and whether the content is executable. So that is the most important thing for us. When we look at the content of how you have redrafted the will, we're not looking at your grammar and your use of very legal terms and that type of stuff. Not at all. We're looking about does the intention and the core of what you have said in the paragraph reflect the intention and the wishes of the testator. A full estate duty analysis. This is from the capital gains tax, possible intestate succession calculation, to the estate duty calculation, to liquidity, to apportionment of estate duty. You know you should be able to do everything. It goes without saying. Again, capital gains tax at death and time apportionment based cost is always of importance. I think that's come through in the last 4 or 5 exam papers. Understand and be able to apply the recent changes to the Estate Duty Act regarding contributions to retirement funds. When we say understand and apply, we mean that you should also be able to calculate. So applying the information in this instance would also mean that you should be able to calculate it in an estate duty calculation. Then also know the pending changes to trusts and estate duty as a whole. You should know what these pending changes are, or at least what the proposals are. Get yourself a good, concise summary of what the Davis Tax Commission is proposing and what the consequences of it are going to be. You should actually know this by now, because you should be advising your clients accordingly in any case. So please make sure of that. Retirement planning. Advice regarding retirement planning and all the relevant calculations. Those are your time value of money calculations and your tax calculations. Be able to do both. And then advice to self-employed person with regard to retirement planning. So there's a little bit of a theme running through these guidelines where there's a lot of self-employed things. So if you are self-employed, there's a possibility that there is no pension fund and there is no provident fund. So how do you go about making sure that your retirement is well looked after? We often find, or I often find, in plannings that I do, that people who are self-employed are so busy throwing money back into their business to try and make their business work that they forget that they need to put a little bit of money aside as well. Remember, business is one of your most vulnerable assets. Creditors can attach your business like this, where retirement annuities and that type of thing is safer because it's safeguarded against creditors if you meet certain requirements. So please make sure that you understand how you would advise a client if they are self-employed with investing into their own business, but also alternative investments that they have to consider for retirement planning purposes. Investment planning and analysis and calculation of the average return on an investment portfolio. Maybe have a look at some old exam papers, maybe have a look at some YouTube videos, maybe go through Investopedia, but understand how you would calculate the average return on a investment portfolio, not on a specific assets. Advice regarding placing investments in self-owned businesses. I've actually just alluded to this in the retirement planning. We're so busy building our own business up that we forget to look at all the other elements of our financial planning, and we end up putting all our eggs in one basket. So have a look at that as well, and then be able to do a complete analysis of rates and listed shares and advise a client accordingly. Again, ladies and gentlemen, I understand that it's difficult for you to prepare for this because you don't know what type of client you are going to get. But if you have the theory and you understand what a rate is, you understand what a listed share is, and you've got the basic theory, then you should be able to apply it to any client. And then risk planning, be able to advise a client on all areas of risks. That's long-term insurance, short-term insurance, and then predominantly also your healthcare benefits, trade, disease, disability, and income protector. So those are basically the elements of risk that we cover. The paper's a little bit different this year to what we've done in the past. I think you all know that you're going to get elements of a person who's self-employed. Make sure that you understand what it is to be self-employed. My best advice is go through all the old quizzes, this year's quizzes, not the old quizzes, this year's quizzes. Go through all the quizzes that will bring you up to date with what's going on in the area of financial planning. Watch all the DVDs again, from the first one right through to every last one. Then Marius Botha has very kindly also made a case study available to us. Keaton and Allison, it's been loaded for you on the portal. I would suggest and advise that you go through that. And then lastly, this is not for studying purposes, but just to give yourself a feel of the case study. Do 1 or 2 old exam papers and mark yourself based on the feedback. If you've got a question, you're welcome to send it through to us. But the case study is really for you just to get to grips with how to answer the paper. Make sure you read your questions correctly. Look at your mark allocation. Make sure you answer everything in the question and it relates back to the mark allocation. In the case study paper, you often get a question of calculate and advise, explain and advise, analyze and advise. So we get a great analysis, a great calculation, a great explanation, but the advice elements are missing. So make sure that you go through those elements. Make sure that you understand the whole question and answer what's being asked. So often get a great answer, but then it's on a keyword in a question. It hasn't answered what the question is asking. So make sure of that. I went through this at the orientation session. please take note of it. Ladies and gentlemen, all the best for the last month of studying. I trust that it's going to go well. I can't believe that today in a month the first exams are starting, so we're holding thumbs for you. We're all rooting for you from the school side, and we know that it will go very well. All the best. Good luck.